It's time for your personal bank show with Ferenc Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of a bank in formation. Take charge of your financial future with your personal bank. Now, here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank show, and I'll tell you what, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. You know, this is a show supposed to be about your money. And, you know, we talk about money, retirement, the economy, all those kinds of things, but we've had to bring the politics of things into play a lot more than I originally anticipated. And even what I was doing a year ago when I was doing this show initially, you know, we didn't talk about politics that much because other than, you know, the economy, well, back then, this was prior to COVID. Of course, the economy was good. Unemployment was low. We had a good, strong, you know, we talked about those kinds of things at times, interest rates sometimes. But since COVID, you know, with the shutdowns, that's really kind of taken the taking the cake, if you will. It's just, you know, they've gotten all the attention, and then the election and everything. And then now with all the things that are happening or attempting to try to happen, and, you know, the challenges on attacks on free speech and all these kinds of things that are happening, just kind of forcing us to deal with the political side of things, certainly more than I intended initially. So again, the focus here on this show is, with Your Personal Bank show, is how to take control of your money. And in this, well, we're navigating some interesting and sometimes uncertain waters with the political situation and economic policy that we see probably going forward, tax policy, all those kinds of things. So our goal is really to navigate those waters, try to cut through the noise, so to speak, which is getting increasingly hard to do. And then, you know, really focus on what to do, how to navigate this with your money and put something away for the future, you know, all that kind of good stuff. So that's really the focus here, of course. And like I always tell people, look, if you missed any of the previous shows, by all means, go to yourpersonalbank.com, check out any of the previously recorded shows. You can pass them on, listen to them anytime you want. A lot of our listeners have been it's been a great resource for them. So what I want to talk about today is a lot of the things, I guess what I would say is the initial impacts of our new administration, federal administration, and some of the focusing primarily on the economic side of things and how it's going to affect our money, basically. And that's really what I really want to focus on. And like I said, one of the solutions that I think is going to become paramount, it's becoming more and more important as always, is to gain control of your money. That's important, rather than having it in the control of others and or government rules or things like that, which are ever changing but seem to be rapidly changing in many cases. Reducing income tax liability, things like that, because many think the income taxes are going to be going up in the future. Those kind of things. Those are things we're going to focus on, of course. The first and foremost thing I guess I want to touch on is, of course, the slew of executive orders that happened right out the gate, pretty much on Biden's first day for the most part. And two in particular, I find, you know, a lot of them, you know, here or there, don't think there's a major impact one way or the other. But two in particular are really, I think, concerning, bothersome from a financial or economic standpoint. And that is the Keystone XL pipeline shutdown and the border wall shutdown. Like I said, I'm not really here to argue the politics about whether those things should have been done or not. But what I want to do is really focus on, because that's another whole discussion, okay? But what I do want to do is focus on what's the economic impact going to be for, well, regular folks, right? And first of all, the first immediate impact on both of those is, well, there's an immediate loss of jobs in both cases. And tens of thousands of good paying jobs, in fact. And there's even, you know, like a lot of union jobs and things like that. And some of the unions that have even come out and such saying, you know, they're not happy about this. And, you know, Canada in particular with the pipeline, not happy. Okay. By shutting down the Keystone Pipeline project, that's, you know, let's face it, undoubtedly has to lead to higher gas prices, higher cost of fuel. Now, that may be, I think that's their goal because of the green energy focus that they, and one of the ways to make green energy more efficient, cost efficient, is if you raise the price of fossil fuels, it becomes more competitive. It just does. It's just an economic fact. So the reasons behind it are many, but it certainly, we've been fortunate the last year or two. We've had low gas prices, low fuel costs, and that has a definite impact on the economy, well, across the board. I mean, the cost of transportation of goods and services lowers when you have lower fuel costs to transport those goods. I mean, it's just kind of that simple. So by reducing the supply, really, the costs go up. I mean, this is economics 101. Okay, obviously, we became energy independent as a country, and that's a nice thing from a political standpoint too. I mean, it's just nice to be independent for one. Don't have to rely on anyone else. That's just a nice position to be in, for one. And as a country, that's a nice position. Secondly, that way you don't have to get entangled. I mean, whether you liked Trump or not, I mean, can't argue the fact that he didn't start any new wars. And in my lifetime, I believe that's the first president that has, certainly in my adult lifetime, is the first president who hasn't started a war. And I served in the military, okay? I was in the U.S. Army, and fortunately I did not have to go to war, but, that's a good thing. When we don't have to send our troops to war, or when we don't, that's a very, very good thing. I mean, it was Teddy Roosevelt that said, speak softly and carry a big stick. You don't have to go to war. Just the threat of it can prevent things like that from happening. So, like I said, that's just a good thing. Now, the border wall thing, again, that's going to create more illegal immigration. Okay, I know that's maybe not politically correct to say, but that's what it is. I'm a first-generation immigrant. My dad is an immigrant. I'm first generation. Now, he came legally. He escaped Hungary from the Soviets back in 1956, ended up coming into the United States, met my mom here when he was in college, and that's why I was born here. But there's a difference, okay? And if you talk to legal immigrants or families of legal immigrants, allowing illegal immigrants into the country is not a positive thing. For one, it's going to it'll reduce wages. It'll also impact unemployment. We have still high unemployment due to COVID shutdowns. And one of the reasons, and again, these things are hard to argue with, they're basic economic facts. One of the reasons why wages were up for pretty much just about everybody prior to COVID is illegal immigration was down. So you have fewer people for the jobs. Supply and demand, folks. Again, economics 101. You have fewer people looking for the jobs, the prices are naturally going to rise. When you have more people vying for particularly the lower income type jobs, those wages are going to drop. Now, who's that going to affect? Primarily people on the lower end of the economic scale, younger people who are just starting out in the workforce, things like that. And that's how it's going to impact. Now, from a political standpoint, some people have pointed out it's basically a favor paying back big business to keep wage costs down. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I'm an entrepreneur. I have been for over 25 years. I've been involved with the Better Business Bureau, chambers of commerce organizations, and things like that. And there's no question that business likes lower wages, lower cost of wage, because it's one of their number one costs. So I'm going to talk more about big business in particular as we go forward. But I think it's important to note here, just for the thought, for the future reference. So those are kind of the immediate things that I see have happened, and unfortunately, in my opinion, aren't necessarily going to be great things for the future of our economy. There'll be some aspects of it that'll be good, of course, like anything, but these are things to keep in mind. Now, the other things that have been like already reinstituted, things like federal abortion funding and military funding for transgender operations. Like I said, I was in the Army, and I never looked at the Army as a place to go that I would not expect, if somebody wanted to change their sex, I would not expect the federal government or the Army to pay for that, or the military to pay for that. And why anyone should think that, I don't comprehend. I'll just put it that way. Military service is not required. It is voluntary, okay? And by the way, there's many medical and mental health issues, for that matter, that disallow you from, you have to qualify to be able to join the military in the first place. And there's many different things that can disqualify you. So why this should be an issue of why the government should have to require the military to pay for this, here's where I have the problem with it. And I have a couple of issues with this from a financial standpoint and a personal standpoint. First thing is, the government has no money. That's the key thing that a lot of people, I think, have forgotten. Government has no money. Where they get their money is tax revenues from taxpayers, us. It's our money. And basically, they're spending our money. Our representatives that we vote in are spending our money. We need to get back to that understanding that this is a fiduciary responsibility that our representatives have to spend our money appropriately. And that's, maybe this horse is out of the barn. Maybe I'm but that's really maybe it's too far gone. I don't know. But our money needs to be spent appropriately, okay? And it's not the role of the federal government to be involved in many of these things. In fact, it states in the Bill of Rights, and I'm quoting, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." In other words, what this means is there's specific rights, specific things in the Constitution that delegates what the federal government is supposed to do. I can tell you abortion and transgender operations are not, are not in the Constitution. And if something is not in the Constitution, that's supposed to revert to the states or the people. See, the bottom line is the federal government has no business, per the Constitution, being even involved in any of this. So why are they even involved? Why we have allowed them to be even be involved? And then on top of that, to insult to injury, to spend our money doing it. Because, folks, it's our money. It's not theirs. The government, remember, has no money. It's ours, tax revenues that we contribute, right? The folks that pay the bills are the ones that are supposed to make the decisions, right? And if our representatives aren't treating our money responsibly, then we need to change who's representing, don't we? So we're going to talk more about these things and going forward and how to focus on how to navigate these uncertain waters with your money and retirement. So stay tuned.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ferenc at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And I guess the main thing I'm talking about so far today is the initial impact of the new administration. And I think the key point, and really focusing on the financial side of things, the economic side of things in terms of impact of these actions that the current administration is taking. I'm not here to get in to argue the politics of it back and forth that much today. I'm really wanting to focus on, whether certain policies right or wrong. We all have personal opinions on that based on our beliefs and all that kind of good stuff. And I'll share some of mine, of course, but I'm really wanting to focus on what's the economic impact. What's the impact to us, our money, our retirement, our ability to put something away for the future, our ability to write, what is it? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And economic security, I talked about in the previous show, I believe last week, one of them, economic security is actually, or economic freedom is actually one of the freedoms afforded to us, in the Declaration of Independence, okay? Somebody who is in debt, in severe debt, is in bondage. That's the bottom line. The creditor or the debtor owes to the creditor, right? So one of the things to do is to get out of economic bondage. We share with people on that kind of thing all the time using Your Personal Bank. And again, the previous shows, last week's show, I even talked about how to accelerate debt payoff. One of the fastest ways I've ever seen, I've used it myself, using the personal bank and actually earning interest on money you allocated to paying off the debt. So you're paying off the debt, you're accelerating it, snowballing it, whatever the process you're using, which is valid, is good, and works, but you're also still earning interest on those dollars you're using to pay down debt. If you miss that, go back to yourpersonalbank.com and check out last week's show where I talk about the debt acceleration. I spend a good portion of the show on it. It's very powerful. But again, what I'm really wanting to focus on today, and I've been starting to, is the economic impact of some of the policies that we've already seen enacted by the new administration. And one point I want people to not forget, and we have as a country kind of forgotten this. And this point is the government has no money. That they don't own any. They don't own any money. It's not theirs. The money that the government has is tax revenues from taxpayers, us. It's our money, and our government representatives should be held to a standard. Frankly, in my opinion, it should be a fiduciary standard of allocating and spending our money in a appropriate manner. I have issues when I see things where I see the last COVID bill or law that passed where the people are supposed to get in the $600 checks, okay, that passed just at the end of the year. There was money in there for Syria. I don't even know. It was hundreds of millions of dollars. There was other things in there too, but that one just kind of stood out to me as especially egregious. You know, we're in the midst of a shutdown. There's still, I guess it's starting to finally open up, but at that time certainly still had major states shut down, businesses shut down, people hurting, people losing their livelihood, jobs, businesses, and all that. But yeah, we're sending money to Syria. Our representatives thought that was important. That's what I'm talking about, is being out of touch with reality. And if we operated that way, our budget, with our business, with our household, well, we would go broke, for one. We'd be gone, no time. But two, there's no sense of fiduciary responsibility. There's no sense of being conscientious about spending our money. We should, as the people that pay the bills are the ones that should have the control. We should demand from our representatives an accountability. And if they don't spend our money appropriately and in a proper manner, we should either demand they change it, and if they don't, vote them out. Get somebody in there that will, okay? That would do a lot to change the future financial situation, certainly of our country, and I think it would solve a lot of other problems, okay? See, here's the problem, and I read this in the last segment. It's in the Bill of Rights, and it basically talks about the powers that are not delegated by the Constitution are reserved for the states or the people. In other words, the federal government has overstepped and trampled the Constitution over the last century. Let's be frank about it. They have gone into areas that have no business whatsoever. It's unconstitutional, and they should not be involved. They just shouldn't be involved. It should be with the states or the people, like the Constitution says. And see, when people, and even most people that I listen to, they get frustrated when they say, well, the government's they're not getting things done up there. Folks, you're missing the whole point. Our representative republic, our system of government of checks and balances is designed for exactly for that very thing, for them not to get much stuff done. Because our founding fathers understood the threat to democracy and freedoms, individual freedom, when a government gets too powerful. They came from monarchy, absolute power from a king, right? They understood what absolute power did. And when you give a government, any type of government, too much power, well, I always say, when you give the government a power, you lose a right. It's just that simple, okay? See, our federal government was designed to protect our rights, not get stuff done. So beyond a few specific things like protecting our borders and things like that, commerce and whatever that's in the Constitution, their main role, their main job is supposed to be to protect our rights. Now, I understand they've gotten way far away from that, and we can blame ourselves a lot of we've allowed them as Americans, we've allowed our government to do that. Now, I understand there's some people out there that prefer that. I get that. I disagree with them. I disagree with them vehemently. But I don't believe, even today, that the majority of Americans want that. See, the thing is, in human history, what has the average person always just ever wanted? It's pretty simple, really. And if our leaders, our government leaders, our business leaders would just respect this desire, life would be a whole lot better for everybody involved. And what is that? What is it that in human history, what is the average individual person always ever wanted? All they've really ever wanted was to be able to live a happy and peaceful life. Right? That's what the vast majority of people want and have always wanted. And that's why this system of government that was put in place that we lived in, we either came to or were born into and were blessed with, giving us unprecedented levels of freedom that hasn't been seen in most of human history, most situations. That's why it's so precious. Now, am I saying it's perfect? Absolutely not. Can things be improved upon? Sure. For example, folks who want to make changes to the Constitution point out there's been, I think, over 20 amendments to it. There are times when and there's a process for that, so it can be amended when things need to be changed. It's a difficult process, and necessarily so, because it needs to be something where an overwhelming majority of folks agree that this needs to be done. These slim majorities where basically half shove down the throat what the other half want to do is not the way things are supposed to operate. And unfortunately, that's the place we're in right now. And it's especially frustrating when you see all these executive orders from presidents. And I'm talking both sides, where one president gets in, changes everything. Then 4 years later, or 8 years later, the next one changes everything back. And then it goes back. That's just yo-yo stuff. So it's crazy. Stay tuned in the next segment. I got off track a bit. I promise I'll get into some more of how the current administration is going to affect our money. So stay tuned.
For more information on your personal bank, feel free to contact Ferenc at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And today we're talking a lot about how the new administration, their initial impacts, how it's affecting our money, retirement, taxes, all those kinds of things. And if you missed a couple of the previous segments, I'm going to encourage you to go to yourpersonalbank.com. You can listen to any of the previous shows, by the way. Check it out. Pass it on to others. Great information, I think, can be helpful in terms of how do we navigate this? First of all, what's the impacts? And then what are we going to do to navigate? I talked about already in the first segment about how the XL pipeline, Keystone shut down, the border wall shut down. The immediate impacts, the loss of a bunch of jobs at a time where unemployment is high. We're still in COVID shutdowns in many parts of the country, or just coming out of them. And it's going to take some time for that to heal or recover. And it's just, it's kind of like a slap in the face. It's really, really frustrating, particularly the pipeline. Most likely, I don't see any way around it. It's going to increase fuel prices, which increase the cost of transportation, which increases the cost of goods goods that are sold across the board, which is bad for the economy. It's bad for individuals. That's the bottom line. It's economics 101. And, forget the political side of it for a minute. It's just basic economics 101. We got to think rationally about this a little bit sometimes. And the border wall shut down. Well, bottom line is, with increased illegal immigration, because that's what it is, and I can say that. My dad was a legal immigrant, okay? Lower wages, higher unemployment. You got more people pursuing jobs, and it's particularly going to hurt a lower income segment of the population, primarily the lower wage jobs, and people starting out in the workforce, okay, when we're competing against illegal immigrants for jobs. It's just going to drive wages down, which is great for big business. Big business loves this, okay, which is part of the reason why most likely this was done, one of the reasons at least. But generally speaking, not good for the economy, not good for individual people who just want to get a job and get started in the workforce, like young folks. So the other part, some of the other things that I see that are political and are frustrating people is this double standard. And I'm going to share with how this kind of affects our money too, because it actually is more than just, a double standard that creates distrust and anger amongst many people, But there's an economic side to it, too. I mean, I'll use a quick example. Biden signed a mask mandate, 100-day mask mandate for federal buildings and such and transportation. Okay, fine. He can do that. He has the legal right to do that. But then immediately, he and his family go celebrate the Lincoln Memorial, and there wasn't a mask to be seen. I mean, it's that double standard that it's just do what I say but not what I do thing that just irritates people. Okay, it just frustrates people. The rules should apply to everyone. In fact, that's where I have a beef with Congress. For the most part, when they pass laws, for the most part, it doesn't apply to them. That's wrong. Every law that Congress passes should apply to each one of them personally also. That should be that should be a constitutional amendment. I bet most people could get on board with that one. But who knows? We'll see something like that. But that's the reality. That's what should happen. I love this one. So Amazon, of course, and Jeff Bezos were very, very in favor of mail-in voting and that kind of thing, overwhelmingly so. You can see from their political donations, well over 80%. I think it's approached 90% Democrat. And then Jeff Bezos owns a company who is wanting to unionize, and they're doing a vote, and they decided they want to do a mail-in vote, and he's coming out adamantly as it being unfair. The mail-in vote is being unfair. Choose a side. Jeff Bezos, I'm sorry. If it's unfair for you, it's unfair for the country. It's either fair or it's unfair, but pick a side. When it affects you directly, you're all for it. Negatively, or you're all for it when it's positive. When it affects you negatively, you're against it. That's not leadership. That's partisanship. And that we have I've said this in previous shows, we have far, far too much partisanship and not anywhere near enough leadership in our country. And I'm talking about big business. I'm talking about government. Where are the leaders? Where are the people that stand on principles, irregardless of the results? But the principle is, hey, mail-in voting is good or mail-in voting is bad. Pick a side. Riots are good or riots are bad. Pick a side and stand by it, irregardless. Okay? That I could respect. I think most people would agree. I don't even know what to think about California anymore. In fact, I don't have time to go into it. All I know is I hope they finally wake up and get themselves a decent governor and stop this one-party rule, because one-party rule, irregardless of the party, is not good for the country or a state. So stay tuned in the next segment. We'll touch on this some more, so don't miss it.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ferenc at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth.
All right, welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And we're going to round third here, wrap this up. But I've gotten a little fired up today because, the topic I've really been trying to touch on what some of the initial impacts of the new administration are, particularly on an economic standpoint. I know there's a lot of political stuff involved. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of opinion. I understand all that. I have some of it myself. But what I've been trying to really do, and I got away from me a little bit, this last segment, of course, is what's the economic impact? How's this going to affect our economy, individual people, their money, retirement, all those kinds of things, okay? And like I said at the beginning, the XL pipeline shut down, the border wall shut down, the immediate impacts is job loss. And those are good, high-paying jobs, tens of thousands, okay? At a time where our economy is still not very good, unemployment is high, parts of the country are still shut down. That's kind of like kicking a dog when it's down, pouring salt in a wound. Just not a good thing, okay, from an economic standpoint. Probably is going to lead to higher gas prices. You have less supply. You're going to have more cost, right? And you have less supply, higher cost of gas, which goes across the board to products and services, increases the cost of goods, okay? More illegal immigration. Remember, my dad was a legal immigrant, so I feel like I can say that. We'll push wages down, particularly in the lower end of the spectrum. It'll impact those starting in the those people that are in that area, okay, and the economy. So again, the double standard, I was talking about that, how it creates distrust and anger when you see governors, the president say wear a mask, then they publicly don't. Things like this, do as I say, not as I do. Well, you just get tired of these divisive tactics is what they are. It's politically divisive. It's frustrating. It just does nothing but anger people. Jeff Bezos coming out and being against mail-in voting for a union vote for one of his companies because it's unfair, as he put it. Unjust and unfair, I think was the terms he used. But was all for mail-in voting, in the election. Pick a side, okay? Have some scruples. Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to somebody having some principles? That's something we can, whether I agree with somebody or don't agree with somebody, I can respect them if they have principles. I've often said this about Bernie Sanders, for example. I agree with almost nothing Bernie Sanders stands for or what he wants. I tend to lean towards, less government and those kinds of things, right? But I respect him because he openly says he wants socialism. That's what he wants. I can respect that. I can disagree, but at least it's those. Anyway, that's another whole thing. The biggest risk I see, and this is going to impact us in a lot of ways as a country and also economically, is this attack on free speech. I think this is the biggest risk, the biggest problem we have right now as we speak. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. I don't know if it's ever been this bad. This cancel culture, where dissent's not allowed in universities or Hollywood, many workplaces or social media, the government, all these kinds of things, is only going to create more and more frustration, anger, probably civil strife. Let's be real. These are not good things for a healthy economy. When you have this, when you get levels of anger and civil unrest, destruction of property and things like that, like we've been seeing all last summer with the riots and frankly continuing they've been continuing even after the elections are over. This is not good. That's not conducive to business. Now, think about this a minute. How would you like to be a small business trying to operate in Portland or Seattle? I mean, what was it? 100 days they were in Seattle, created their own country or whatever, independent, whatever it was. You basically are out of business. Okay? It's that kind of stuff. I just read this, and I mean, it is, apparently it's true. The National Association of Realtors basically said if someone dissents, even privately, especially about race, they may be fined or even lose their license. If you're a realtor and that's how you make your living, and I'm not saying you should be racist. Don't get me wrong. I don't think racism is a good thing. But when they're defining what dissent is, and it's something they don't agree with, it's a political opinion or whatever, and you could lose your license, literally lose your livelihood as a result because you have a different opinion than somebody else does, that's an attack on civil liberties. That is an attack on free speech. That will impact that person dramatically, financially, no question. I've never seen media pushing for censorship at this level. It's unprecedented. But there's many other things where a lot of people are starting to call them as these corporate overlords, where they're limiting dissent and they're limiting competition. They're shutting down. I mean, Parler is a perfect example of where, you want to see collusion? Folks, we heard for years about Russian collusion and all this stuff, which, I don't think a lot of people cared, frankly, but whatever. It was a complicated, convoluted, and seems to be discarded thing that basically, it was a political stunt, right? What's real collusion? What we saw with Parler. I mean, within something like 24 hours, Parler was the number one fastest growing app. It was a free speech app, similar to Twitter, and it was an alternative to Twitter, of course. If you haven't heard of this already, I'm sure most have. And they were the number one fastest growing app, like on the Apple Store and the Play Store. They were growing too fast. They were becoming a very serious threat to Twitter. Many thought if they continued going the way they were going going to either become near as big, if not bigger than Twitter. Okay? Well, they had to shut them down. It was competition, right? Now, Twitter obviously has good connections with Apple and Apple and Google, and they, within a day or so together, took them off their app, took them off their platforms. Twitter wasn't a threat to Apple or Google for that matter. But even worse, they got an Amazon Web Service to take them off, so they couldn't be even on the internet. Parler was no threat to Amazon, not in any way, shape, or form. But yet those three companies, work together to help out a buddy, a partner. That's collusion. That's where that's monopolistic type of where a cabal, if you will, a group of companies or powerful individuals work together against and squish competition. That's not right. People say, well, private companies have the right to yes, but they don't have the right to illegally work together in a collusion and shut out competition. They don't have the right to do that. Now, it looks like they're going to come back. I hope they do for all their sake. And this is what can we do? What are some of the things we can do? Well, if somebody like Parler comes back, and I believe this will happen. I know I'll sign. I don't even use Twitter or Parler or any of that stuff. But I'll sign up and I'll do it and I'll encourage others. And I think they'll be bigger than ever. In fact, they'll probably grow faster than they would have if they hadn't been shut down. That would be the true way to respond. I heard somebody talking about this instead of boycotts, he called them boycotts. I thought that was great. In other words, embrace and endorse the companies that support free speech and don't the ones that don't. So that's why personally I've switched my browser. I don't use Google anymore. Hardly as little as possible. I've switched to a company called Brave. I'd encourage you to do the same or look for somebody similar to that. They support free speech, privacy, and they don't collect your information, as far as I can tell. And there's no ads. It's faster. This is the cool part. It's faster than Google, and they're not squashing free speech rights. Okay, so I'm supporting Brave and not Google anymore. So when somebody says Google it, I'm telling them no, Brave it. Now, there's other companies, don't get me wrong. And I have nothing, by the way, full disclosure, I have nothing to do with Brave, and I'm not a tech person. I just found I'm just not willing to support a company that's going to do that kind of thing. Okay? And as far as a search engine, because Google is both a browser and a search engine, I'm using Brave with Startpage. Startpage is out of the Netherlands. They've won awards for privacy, and it's faster. By the way, it kind of looks like Google did years ago before they started all the ads. It's kind of cool. It goes back, but it works better. And the Rumble instead of Facebook, Parler instead of Twitter. There's alternatives out there. If millions of people who believe in free speech, I'm not talking about conservatives, I'm not talking about libertarians, I'm talking about anyone who believes in free speech, would start to support companies that don't infringe on your free speech rights and stop supporting companies that do infringe, I'll tell you, folks, we can make a difference. That's where we can vote with our pocketbooks as well as at the ballot box, okay? And voting by the pocketbooks in terms of business is probably much, much more impactful. If enough people do that and it makes enough dent in the bottom line, that can make a difference. And if it doesn't, well, that's okay too, because what we've done is just created healthy competition, which is what needs to happen. These big tech companies have dominated that market for far too long. The alternate infrastructure needs to be developed. Free speech champions need to do this. And I believe that's happening as we speak. We need to support it. By the way, I refuse to, at this point, I've decided I refuse to. I used to buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. I mean, just shop on Amazon, but not anymore. And right now I'm looking for alternatives to that. So I would ask, and I'm looking for alternatives for a good email server because I use a lot of Google stuff, like Gmail and things. I want to find a good alternative for emails. I haven't had time to find it all. I'm in the process. If somebody's got a good suggestion, please contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. I'll look into it. I'll start using it myself. I'll encourage others to do so. We all need to do the same thing. Word of mouth is powerful. And if we start sharing through word of mouth that, hey, instead of using Google, use Brave and Startpage because they support free speech or they don't infringe. We'll put it this way. I don't know if they support it. They're a free speech alternative. At least they don't infringe. You know what I'm saying? Like Google did with Parler, right? And here's why is this so important. If these big tech conglomerates, these are global companies. These aren't American companies. These are global conglomerates. So they're not just looking at American values. They may be based in the U.S., but that doesn't mean anything. If these global conglomerates can shut down Parler, can shut down a sitting president of the United States, I don't care if you agree or disagree, whether you liked Trump or hated him. That's to me totally immaterial. The fact that, the president of the United States is supposed to be the most powerful person on the planet, and if they can shut him down, that person, him or her down, which they did, well, who else can they do it to? And who's next? And we're already seeing that domino effect. Are we going to stop it? Are we going to stand in the gap and not support and encourage this? Or are we going to do something about it? And that's what I'm going to encourage you to do. By the way, I haven't had time to talk about it today very much, so stay tuned to the next show or listen to the previous shows on yourpersonalbank.com about how your personal bank gets you out of the government system for your money and all those tax rules. You gain more control of your money. See, that's one of the main benefits of your personal bank. Do you want to get out of this government system? You want to get out of all the rules and the tax rules that constantly change? And do you want to support the administration and the activities that our government is doing where they're trampling our Constitution, they're infringing on our rights constantly, spending money, our money, not theirs, ours, remember, the government has no money. It's our money that we give to them to use in a prudent manner. They should do it in a prudent manner. But when they waste it, which just constantly happens, do we need to support that as much? I'm not saying do anything unethical or illegal. There's legal options out there to not support that so much. So contact me at yourpersonalbank.com to learn more about that, how you can gain control of your money, reduce your tax liability, and again, gain more control of your money and your future for you, your family, and your business.
Listen Tuesday at noon and Thursdays at 1 for more information on Your Personal Bank. Contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and baseline of credit rates may change. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.